Hello, this is Jenny Shore from Metal Priestesses podcast. We'd like to welcome to the show Cynthia Ross from the theb-girls, who formed in 1977 during the first wave of punk. The theb-girls hailed from Canada and relocated to New York City, where they played CBGBs and had demos produced by Debbie Harry. The band also opened for The Clash and were signed to Bomb Records. Also joining is her label mate and musical sister, Nikki Corvette. Her band, Nikki and the Corvettes, also started in 1977, but in Detroit, Michigan. Both bands have a 1960s sound and have been labeled as bubblegum pop. I love their music. They've been a major influence on many bands, such as the Go-Go's and the Donnas. As always, take it away, Wendy.
It develops. We urge you to stay tuned to radio and TV and to stay indoors at all costs.
As of 12 noon tomorrow, say goodbye to the world as you know it. Say goodbye to
Metal Priestesses.
Hi.
Hi, Cynthia.
Welcome. We have everybody here.
So, Elizabeth, you could introduce us all.
Okay, we have me. I'm in Chicago. Genevieve and Jesse are in LA. And then, of course, you two know each other very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Nikki.
Hi,
how you doing? All right, you? Good.
how are you both?
Good? Good as can be.
During a pandemic and
Yeah, you know.
financial collapse of the capitalist system. Yeah, that's
All of that.
How did you two meet?
It develops. We urge you to stay tuned to radio and TV and
playing,
to stay
actually.
indoors
I think,
at all costs.
as of 12
Nikki,
noon
what you
tomorrow,
did to Nikki
say
and Corvette's
goodbye
start.
to the world as you know it.
Officially
Say goodbye
January
to
of 78.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Metal
the
Priestesses.
girls were like at the age of 77. So we met through playing with each other. B-girls went to Detroit and we would play with Nikki and the Corvettes, and Nikki would come to Toronto and play with the B-girls. That's amazing you've been friends this whole time.
It's the rock and roll thing. In rock and roll, you can be friends with somebody that you only see or talk to once or twice a year, and then just pick up where you left off, because that's just how rock and roll is.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel, I was doing a lot of research, and of course, I'm big fans of both of your bands, and it's so incredible because Backstage Pass also started in 1977, and we went to we housed the Damned when they got kicked off the television tour.
Right.
And half of them stayed with us in Los Angeles and half of them stayed with the Screamers at the Wilton Hilton. And we had a place called Courtney Crash Pad. And one of the things that we went to was the Bomb Records in-store. And that was in April of 1977. And they said, you guys got to stop rehearsing. You need to get out and do a show. And we did do some shows. And one of the first shows was opening up for Elvis Costello at the Whiskey, which was so unprepared, but it was amazing anyways. But I always went to like Bomb Records things, and also Rhino Records as well.
I remember those guys too. Yeah. So
and you both are on Bomb Records.
Yes.
Yes.
We're
And
both Greg Shaw signings, and
Right.
what a wonderful guy.
Yeah, I remember Greg Shaw with the blonde. Who did he?
The Brian
he looked
Jones
like Brian
haircut.
Jones look, which was like the ultimate like rock and roll fantasy for me anyway. I was like, sort of that. I only liked the Rolling Stones when Brian Jones was in the band, put it that way.
Yeah, the Stones till 72 were the best.
Yeah, yeah. So I wish that Backstage Pass had time to develop like your bands. I mean, when I listen to your records, I'm like so jealous and so envious because they're so great, and they're just
Well,
such
wait a minute.
perfect-
Like the B-Girls had no idea what the hell we were doing at all. I mean, we formed the band and then learned how to play. So
Yeah, we all did.
it wasn't like we were professional musicians.
Right.
It was just easier to write your own songs than cover things because no one could tell if you were making mistakes that way.
Yeah, that's the ultimate punk thing, right?
Yeah.
Cynthia, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and
Buffalo.
Yeah, I just can't believe that you guys would make that trip all the time from Toronto to New York City, because that is a long drive.
It was, and I'm getting to the reverse trip on Tuesday to go and stay with my mom. But yeah, I was the only one who drove at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's dedication.
Yeah. Is that an age?
Can you tell us? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about CBGBs and so did you play there or did you go to lots of shows?
We played there a lot eventually. Like we eventually just moved to New York because we were playing in New York more often than we were playing in Toronto, at least once or twice a month. And, we were working in Toronto and we eventually just all quit our jobs and moved to New York. But before we did our first gig, I believe it was in 77 because it was during that big blizzard in 1977.
Yep.
And we had a gig and the gig got canceled because of the snowstorm. The gig was actually at Max's Kansas City.
Oh,
and then I went in to see Hilly and I told him that we weren't leaving New York until he gave us a gig.
I think that's the way you had to do it with him,
Sounds like it.
So something about that, he loved that. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah, we're not leaving. We're not leaving, actually not leaving your office until you give us a gig. So he thought that we had a lot of balls to do that, to be so, forthright. And so he gave us a gig on the following Friday night, which was really unheard of. Usually he would make you do the Monday night audition night.
Right.
And from there we became regulars. And, I think it's common probably to Nikki and the Corvettes and Backstage Pass and many, many other girl bands. We opened for a lot of really big shows.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
who were some of the people that did you play with, like Ramones or
Blondie
or
the Ramones, the Dead Boys, Blondie, Elvis Costello, Mink DeVille, the Jam, Sham 69. I mean, I have like a whole page because I'm trying to write a book. I've been trying to do that for about 5 years, but I have all the bands written out. We played with Sylvain, obviously, and Robert Gordon and Chris Betting. We did the first Clash tour on the East Coast. We opened for them.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of bands. And Nikki opened for a lot of the same bands.
Yeah. Nikki, did you ever live in New York?
I did in the summer of 77.
Oh, fun.
10 years after the Summer of Love.
Yeah, it was summer of Son of Sam and the Blackout. And
you picked a great summer.
My mom used to call me because my hair was dark brown then, and she'd say, well, you can't walk on the street, you can't do this. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Didn't you run away from home, Nikki? I also ran away, but didn't you run away?
I did when I was 16 because my mom wouldn't let me go see the MC5, and that was really important. So, I mean, I did move back eventually, but it was worth it. Seeing the MC5 was definitely worth it. Lived in a tent for a while and just lived with friends, and I wish I could tell my mom how sorry I am that she had to live through my teenage years.
Could you tell my kid? I would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
My mom died. I got sick when I was 15 and a half, and I started playing electric guitar. And I went to school with all these people who were like, electric guitar girl? No. And when she died, I was 17, and I ended up running away to Hollywood also. And so I was a mess, but I ended up meeting incredible people. And one of the first shows I went to was Dr. Feelgood.
Oh, great.
The Starwood. And I think it was the bicentennial, because Jake Riviera was wearing like a bicentennial tie. He hadn't started Stiff Records yet. He was their tour manager, and he was like grinning at me, and I'm like, I'm going for the lead guitar player, Wilco Johnson. I don't know what you're doing looking at me, but we stayed friends. And do you remember, we used to just write each other? Remember the letters? And
yes.
I still have tons of letters from Greg, actually, because the B-Girls, like a few years ago, 2017, we decided to reform the band, or a rebirth. It's not like reforming the original band, but it was myself and the original singer, and we got two younger girls from New York on bass and on guitar and drums. Sorry, and I approached Susie at Bomp, Greg's ex-wife, and her husband now at Alive, Patrick, and about putting out all the demos that the B-Girls had. So in 2017, we released a pink vinyl on Bomp.
Yeah, you can still get it. You can still get it.
I have about 300 of them in my front hall if anybody wants one.
I want the pink T-shirt. I want the 40. Yeah, we reformed in 2018.
Yeah,
for Radio Free Hollywood. I don't know if you remember them at all, but
no,
it was sort of like Jesse. Do you remember who was one of the big pop bands? The Pop. Oh, yeah. What am I talking about? Yeah. So, and then
Hollywood Stars.
The Hollywood Stars, and there was a lot of bands. I was so nervous. My kid looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you never have to do this again." And then the minute we got off the stage, I was like, "When are we doing it again?" But
we stole that show. We stole.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
We just played for 15 minutes and like ran off the stage.
That's great. That's what we did our first show back. We did actually the Burger Beach Bash at Coney Island was our first show that the Born Again B-Girls did. And when we played in LA, I went for the Women of Rock Oral History.
Yes, I was there.
Yeah, I went and visited Susie out at Bomp, and she gave me this file that Greg had on the B-Girls, and he kept every single letter, every single interview that he wrote by hand, and all these photos, and like the questions that he was asking me and my answers. And the funniest thing was that not much has changed at all. I mean, it's a lot of the answers were the same answers that I would give now, though it's 40 years later.
Cynthia, how did you meet Stiv?
I met him in Toronto. It was 1976. And the B-Girls were sort of, I think we were actually forming in 1976, but we didn't play till 1977. And we were, because they were opening for the Ramones at the New Yorker Theater. And we all knew the Ramones. We'd already been going back and forth to New York even before the B-Girls existed as a band. Right. And I was walking up Yonge Street, the main street in Toronto. And I was already, of course, going to the show, but I see this like scrawny guy walking down the street, and he gives me this look. I had no idea who he was. And he said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And we just started talking. And he said he was from New York. And I said, "Oh," and then he asked me if I wanted to go for dinner. And I said, "Sure." And we went for dinner. And then halfway through the dinner, he said he had to go for sound check. And I said, "Sound check for what?" And he said, "Oh, I'm on the Ramones show. Do you need to be on the guest list?" And I said, "No, I'm already on the guest list. I'm going, obviously." And And that was it. That was our first, we love at first sight.
That's a great story, though.
Yeah.
And Nikki,
And
you
then-
also met Steve, and you were also friends?
Yeah. Steve and Miriam from Norton Records and, A-Bones, the Zanties. And James Slyman used to manage the Dead Boys, I think.
Yeah.
And all these bands. We all met in like 73. They all lived in Ohio. I lived in Detroit. And we were Dolls groupies. And we used to follow the Dolls around. And so we all got to know each other. And like we'd all go someplace and, like have 15 of us in one hotel room, or just show up at a Dolls show and say, we don't have any place to sleep. And, and so we all got to be friends that way. And most of us weren't in bands then. So, a couple of years later, everybody was in bands. But back then we just, wherever we could see the Dolls, we always ended up in Ohio or Michigan, sometimes New York.
Yeah.
Wow. Nikki, you have some incredible pop songs that I just adore.
So great.
They're just like perfect pop
I love
gems.
Yeah.
And how do you write your songs? Do you write a guitar or?
I mostly write lyrics. When I write a melody, I used to play guitar, but I don't anymore because it just wasn't working for me. So I have to remember the melody until I can get someplace and record it. So I just have to keep singing it over and over, or sing it to a guitar player and say, okay, write down what this song is. And a lot of times I just write lyrics. I write lyrics and I send them to different bands I work with and say, okay, put music to this. Or I tell people to write me music and I'll write lyrics to it.
Wow.
I wasn't surprised when I heard that you were a huge influence for the Donnas, because their music sounds so much like your music. And I read that and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense, because they're such a great band. And then reading that they were so influenced by you.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It was great. There was a time when our album was released on CD. I think it was in 2000 or 2001. And I started getting emails or letters or whatever from all these girls saying, oh yeah, your band really influenced me. And I thought everybody was just, being nice. I didn't think any of them knew who I was. And then they started sending me covers of my songs. And then I heard the Donnas. And when I heard that line, I want to be like Nikki Corvette, I was alone. And I was like, who can I tell about this? Because it was so cool. And then I went, oh, people do know who I am.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
One of our band members in the 2018 version is Gwen Kahn, and she was in the original Pandoras.
Right.
Were you aware of the Pandoras?
Yeah.
Yes. When they were recording their first album, Greg took me to the studio and, we listened to them recording for a while. Although I think at the time they were like, why is he bringing a girl from another band here? And, I was just kind of saying, he just brought me here and I was just listening. So yes, I knew who they were. I knew who they were when they were doing their first record.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think all the girl bands knew who all the other girl bands were. 'Cause there weren't really that many. And also for me, there was this attitude that I don't know why you guys started bands, but for me, it was standing around watching these guys who couldn't really play and saying, why are we standing around watching? We could do this. Let's just start a band, that's how the B-Girls started. But Nikki and I have talked about this because when we did the B-Girls, the newer shows a few years ago, and we played in Toronto, Nikki came up, and it was wonderful because Nikki got up and sang with us on stage, and
the old days.
yeah, it was so great. I was crying. I was so happy to see you. I was crying. But then we had these conversations about, the B-Girls were these good girls. We had I managed the band and booked all the gigs, and I had all these rules that we could never go out with a guy in a band that we were opening for, and you couldn't sleep with a guy in the other band because then people could say that was the only reason that you got the gig. And Div was the exception. Yeah, we were like so, it was ridiculous. And Nikki said, "Oh no, I wasn't like that at all."
Me neither. When we went to San Francisco, Spock made up a rule. She said, "Okay, tonight we're not going home with anybody." And then so then I met this guy Robert. I was out of there, and they had to find me. I was sitting on a street corner in San Francisco because it was at the Mabuhay Gardens,
Right.
And then I couldn't drive back with Spock because she would have like chopped my head off and killed me.
I guess she was like me. But yeah, so the funny part was, Lucasta, the original singer, she was not in the band for very long, but she is the one who we reformed the band together and did the tour of Japan and stuff.
Yeah.
And she said one of the reasons I left was because of all you and your stupid rules and making us all wear the same clothes. And, I had a thing in my mind that we were like the Shangri-Las and we had to have a look. And nobody could say that, we didn't deserve to get the gigs that we got. And she said, I never really followed your rules. I just didn't tell you, Yeah. So
you both had great looks. You both bands had great looks.
We had similar looks, which is funny, right, Nikki?
Yeah, because our looks were very similar before we ever met each other or knew about each other. It just kind of happened. But my band used to not approve of some of my antics. And there was one time when they carried me out of someone's hotel room screaming and, threw me over somebody's shoulder. I'm like, I don't have to put up with this. And decided that we were in Minneapolis, and I decided that I was going back to Detroit because our show was over. In the middle of winter, no coat, no purse, just started walking. And they were following behind me going, you have to come back with us. You can't walk back to Detroit.
You were putting your foot down.
That sounds like a song. You can't walk back to Detroit.
There you go.
I do get partial credit if you write it.
Yeah, you do.
Absolutely.
That kind of leads into a question of something that's going on right now in the music world. And there's this new anger, I think, that women are having towards rock stars like Iggy Pop or the Rolling Stones, guys that slept with underage groupies. But I have a hard time thinking that any of the groupies regret it. I mean, I'm sure there's one or two, but what are you guys' thoughts on that?
It was a really different world back then. And personally, when I was like 15, 16, you couldn't stop me from doing what I wanted to do. I was going to do it. And no matter what anybody said, I wasn't coerced into anything.
Right.
I knew what I wanted and went for it. And, I think things are different now. I think if you go back to the 70s, there's stuff that we would all regret that wasn't wrong at the time, but now, taken out of context would be totally different. So I'm kind of torn on that. I'm sure there were some underage girls that probably shouldn't have done what they did and might regret it. But I think a lot of the girls knew what was going on. They made their choice.
I think things are really, really different now. And I think social media has a big part of what's happening now, like the phenomenon of people, going online and talking about their experiences with a certain, male rock and roll person and then sharing that. We didn't have those avenues of connecting with each other. And I think like Nikki, with me, I never did anything I didn't want to do. So I wouldn't say that I wanted that. I was more, you know what? I didn't want to be with the guys in the bands. I wanted to be them. That was the difference with me. I wanted to be that bass player. I didn't want to, so.
But you know what's interesting is what you've all said is sort of from the perspective of how you know, at that age would have done it. But I think the suggestion is, and the correction, the historical correction, is that the men didn't think about that. They were like, oh, you know, they were the ones that should have been thinking.
Right.
They should have said, no, you know, I want to see your ID. I mean, I was in bands, and before I transitioned, you know, I damn well asked for IDs because I didn't, you know, I just felt wrong to me, you know. So and you know, I was playing in the late 70s and early 80s and stuff. So I think that's the problem. I think that you're right. If you made those choices, that's great. But why were they doing it? And
I agree
and how bad was that?
Yeah, I agree with that. There is a responsibility, you know, on the person that has the more power. I definitely think that, you know, like the deciphering of, I don't know, like what's right and what's wrong. And there is a moral code, especially when it comes to children. And some of these situations, the girls are children.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. I think, you know, there was times where I absolutely was young and the same, did what I wanted to do. But then I could think of one thing in particular where I felt that the person felt very vulnerable and felt, you know, sort of taken advantage of in one situation. But I think like when my kid was, she was a YouTube person, and there was a lot of guys, this is like in 2011, and a lot of those guys from this one particular VidCon thing, they were all no longer on YouTube because they were taking advantage of people that young girls that kind of worship them. They were taking advantage of those people, and that was a really horrible situation. And that was all shut down. I think there was even one person that went to prison for
I think
it.
social media definitely makes it worse because it makes it easier and it makes it feel more like less threatening in one way, and makes you more vulnerable in another way because you're starting through conversations usually with other people. And I mean, even in my experience recently, you know, at my age, you know, on Instagram, I friended somebody who was a musician who I don't really know, or I followed them. And then the guy came back with like this kind of creepy, like, how long have you been a fan of my music? And I was like, okay, block.
Yeah, out. Yeah, but for younger people who have a dream and they're hoping to get successful or something,
the power thing,
the power tripping thing. Yeah, I know when our band started, we didn't want to have the Svengali, like the Kim Fowley.
Right.
That's the one thing we didn't want to have. And I auditioned for the Runaways and he told me that I was fat, you know? So that was the one thing that we didn't want to have, whether we played good or didn't play good. We just didn't want to be told what to do or how to do it.
Well, I mean, I've always said, like, the one thing about the B-Girls is that we were a real actual band. It was no guy's idea. There were no auditions. We were just four friends. One was my sister originally, who just decided to start a band and write songs and, you know, learn how to play our instruments together and then move to New York together and then go through all these adventures together. And when it came to the time where we were actually looking for a record deal, we got this lawyer that was Debbie's lawyer, because Debbie had produced some demos for us.
Debbie Harry.
And he told me, you know what, Cynthia, you can't be the manager of the band because record companies are not going to take you seriously. You need to have a guy. And he said, you need to have a guy and have a manager representing you. And we went with somebody and we ended up paying to get out of that management contract. He was a lovely person and everything, but he couldn't get us gigs that were as good as the gigs that I was getting. And then we had to pay him a percentage, you know, and, you know, when we went and we interviewed managers, as you say about this Kim Fowley, you know, that type, we got quite a few of the ones that were the more established managers that wanted to manage us. They would do the divide and conquer thing of saying, you know, well, you're okay, you can play bass, but the guitar player really can't play guitar. And so when you record, you know, you're going to use studio musicians. So we never did that. And that's probably why we didn't get a record deal. And they told us they were going to send us to choreography, and this one had to lose weight and all of this. And it was everything that we weren't. So, you know, we played out of tune a lot. We weren't perfect. Yeah, but we were real. But a lot of the other bands who really did make it did have session musicians play on their records.
However, like I was the stylist for the Bangles.
Right.
And they were pressured into having
They were. Oh, everybody would do
musician
that.
because as a band,
the
they were
Go-Go's
phenomenal.
as well. Yeah, the
and
Go-Go's
I dressed them as well. And I became a stylist.
Runaways. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were all sounded great on their own. You know, I mean, Vicky's a great guitarist. They were all.
No, I agree.
Great singers.
I agree, but you couldn't be part of the business if you didn't follow those. It was like they were in charge, you know. So you had to sell out and give up some, and that's why we never signed. Debbie warned me. She said, "Don't ever give up creative control. These guys are going to do all this," and it was exactly what they were suggesting. They're going to say you can't play on this. They're going to say you need to lose weight, or you know, go get choreography on how to be on stage and how to talk to people. And I was like, oh my God, no, I'm not going to charm school. You know,
you played with but both of you, you know, you were in New York in '77. Like that was such an important year for punk rock. And even, you know, 78, 79. And Cynthia, you were really in the heart of all of that. And Nikki, you were for the summer. The summer of Sam.
It's quite a summer, though.
Yes, it was.
Nikki, did you feel like you didn't want to be Spangolied either?
I have always been very independent, strong-willed, know my own mind, and no matter what anybody said, I just didn't listen. This is, you know, I said, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. I went in the studio with Kim Fowley one time, and we were doing a song that somebody he was working with wrote, and we were there for a couple hours recording, and you know, every time I'd say something, he would say, "You don't talk unless I say it's okay."
Wow.
And, you know, saying really misogynistic things to me. And after a couple hours, I stood up and I said, I don't care what anybody else does, but I'm not doing this record. I'm leaving. I'm not working with this person, and walked out.
Wow.
Good for you.
A lot of people are like, but it's Kim Fowley. I'm like, I don't care. You know, nobody is going to talk to me this way. He's not better than me. And you know,
he was like that bitch from Detroit.
But no, he was like that with everybody. I mean, we rehearsed when he was working with the Quick. We were rehearsing in the next room in this like flea-bitten 2-trailer studios on the Cahuenga Pass there, right? And he used to come in and start saying stuff. And so one time I finally just chased him out of the room. I got angry, and he's, you know, twice my size, but he's like this little scrawny thing, and I'm just like, go away, you know. It's like we don't want you, and you know. And it wasn't like he was coming in saying, I'll get you a record deal. He was just like saying stuff, and we're like, why are you in here?
He did a lot. He sacrificed. I remember being at a Rhino Records store, and he just pointed me out as being bisexual just to get a laugh. And I remember seeing Harold from Rhino at Gary Stewart's Christmas party, like his last Christmas party, maybe 3 years ago. And I said, Harold, I remember that you were laughing. And he said, I wasn't laughing at you. I was amazed that Kim Fowley did that. And I was just so happy to have that healing with Harold, you know, who owned Rhino, you know, and, but yeah, I was so young and I was so embarrassed. I wanted to just disappear, you know, when he did that to me. It was horrible.
I kind of want to hear some New York stories. What are
Yeah.
your favorite memories, favorite shows? I mean, you guys were just around when everything was really happening.
Well, I guess for me, I mean, a lot of the favorite memories were the B-girls with the Ramones and using their loft, Joey and Arturo's loft as our dressing room. And we changed there for shows, and just the whole camaraderie between all of the bands. Like we roamed in packs, you know, if someone had a gig at Max's, we would all go there, and then we would go to CBGB's to see the other bands, you know, and every night, every bill, every band was good on those bills. It's not like now, you know, where there's too many bars, too many bands, anybody can do it. It's too accessible. It was like a gang, you know, and it was before the internet and cell phones. So you used to have to say, let's meet on the corner of, you know, Bleecker and Broadway or whatever, you know, at this time, and let's go out for dinner, and then let's go to the show. And just the whole thing, like how every band helped each other. The B-girls slept on Still's floor for about a month and a half when we first moved there. We slept on a lot of people's floors, but Still was just wonderful. And he would take us shopping on 14th Street to buy these big vinyl, red vinyl caps that are like the Sylvain caps that he eventually made. And, you know, he was hilarious. It was like a brother. And David at that time used to feed us once a week. We'd go to his apartment with Syl and Bobby Blaine and I don't know, whoever was around. And David was a great chef, you know, he made good, healthy food. And it was just a sweet time. I mean, it got a little crazier when it got to around like 1979, I think, when drugs started really kind of getting more prominent.
I wanted to ask you about Nancy, because we've never had anyone on the show that's known her, and she seemed like a hot mess.
Well, so there's two ways. There's two ways of looking at it, because when I was there, and like as you know, as I guess you can gather from the way I was speaking at the beginning, I'm probably like very prudish compared to the way most people were, and proper. I don't know if it's from being Canadian or like what it is, but my experience of hanging out with her was, you know, I didn't appreciate being around her. I was intimidated by her. You know, she was loud, she was brash, she was everything that I wasn't, you know, showing everything, sloppy, like all of it. But when I look back at it, I look at it in a different way. And I think if she was a guy, nobody would have said anything about those behaviors or her attitude. And she was quite bright, you know. I didn't personally interact with her that well. I was really good friends with Sid. Both Steve and I were really close with Sid. We babysat him every day while she went to Times Square and danced, you know.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah. And Sid was sweet. He was funny. He was shy, you know.
Everyone says that about Sid. You read that often. So, you know, it does kind of not make sense that he would actually murder her, which
I'm sure that never happened.
I've seen the movies, and I don't think that that it was him either. But it's just nice to be able to talk to somebody that, you know, knew the good side of him. We had Alice Begg on, and she met him at a very unfortunate time when he tried to upstage her, and she was like, "Never meet your idols." But
yeah, he was nice really sweet. He had good manners. He was nothing. It was just like Stiv. You know, Stiv on stage and off stage were two completely different things. Like I always say, if I had seen him play before I met him that day, I would never have even talked to him. Seeing what he was like on stage with the, the gum and the crawling around and, the antics, and then seeing like all the other stuff later on at CBGB's with girls, with his pants open, and like, it was like, oh my God. But Stiv was completely blind. So when he went on stage, he would take his glasses off, and they were like thick as Coke bottles, those sunglasses he wore, and he couldn't see a thing. So it took away all his inhibitions. He couldn't see the audience at all. And, when he was off stage, he was like, he came to my, dinner at my parents', he met my grandparents. My grandfather taught him how to tango. I still have this image of the two skinny, scrawny guys tangoing in the living room, He brought me flowers. It was, yeah.
Yes.
And Sid was kind of like that too.
That's beautiful. Now, Nikki, what are your memories of New York? in the best summer ever.
Well, some of it's the same, it was, you would go to every club every night, just, whatever the timing was, go see this band, and then, go to Max's to see this band, and, just walking back and forth. And it was with a lot of people, and, you could go, like, there were shows I went to that were outside of New York, like in not the suburbs, but farther away.
Long Island or Brooklyn.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we did that too.
Where I would go and not have a way to get home, and just say to the band, hey, can I ride with you? And everybody took care of you. Yeah. Everybody took care of everybody else. Everybody supported everybody else. Yeah. I totally agree with that. It was really different from how it is now, because you had in-person stuff. You didn't have all the virtual, you didn't have the social media. So you knew people and they knew you. It's like every night when the clubs closed, there'd be a big sidewalk party with everybody hanging out and talking, nobody wanting to leave. I had a lot of fun that summer.
Yeah, it could bring back a lot of memories. So one time we rented a car to go out and see the David Johansen band at my father's place on Long Island. And I went with this guy, John Browner, who was a writer, but he hung out with all the Blondie people. And I think that maybe Jimmy Destry was in the car, one of the other B-girls, and Iggy Pop. And Iggy, halfway out there, decided he wanted to drive. And there was no way. The car was like, I rented it in my name. I was not letting him drive. He was like trying to pull the wheel, like, stop the car, let me drive. And it was like, he was so out of it, it was craziness. And then when we got there, I think we left him there. I didn't want to take him back in the car, because of the behavior. But this thing about trying to find a place to stay, that was another common thing after, like, we used to sleep at people's lofts on the Bowery. We, when the B-girls toured with the Clash, we all slept in one room. We always did that, with two single beds, and we'd take the mattress off the bed, and one would sleep on the box spring, one would sleep on the mattress. So there were four of us in one room at the Empire Hotel, and it was the night that we opened for the Clash at the Palladium. And Johnny Thunders and Wayne Kramer had come in from Michigan, from Ann Arbor. Wow. And they were at the show. And when they came into the dressing room, Joe Strummer asked me to ask Johnny to leave, because he said, I don't trust him being in here with all the guitars and all this. And I was like, oh my God, Joe. I said, you can't ask me to do that. He's my friend. Like, if you really feel that way, you'll have to get security to ask him to leave, which he did. Wow. So after the show, we hung out with them for a while, and then we all just went back to our hotel room, B-girls. We were asleep, and I hear this banging on the door, and it was Johnny and Wayne. They had nowhere to stay. And so we put, like, the room was packed with all of us, and the girls were sleeping. So we put blankets in the bathtub, and Wayne slept in the bathtub. And then Johnny slept on the floor beside me, sleeping on the box spring. And I slept with my foot on him because I was worried about him. He wouldn't steal from me, but I couldn't trust him with some of the other girls' stuff. And so in the middle of the night, I heard this rustling, rustle, and I looked down and I'm like, what are you doing? And he had the night table drawer open. I've told this story before. He was rolling a joint with one of the pages from the Bible, from the Gideon's Bible. And I said, what the hell are you doing? I said, I thought you were an altar boy. He goes, I am. I'm imbibing the word of the Lord. And it's like, it was just ridiculous. Like, so there were all these crazy stories, you know.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Nikki, did you go to LA when you were recording?
I went to LA in early 79 and I don't remember who we were going to record with first. Greg put us in the studio with all these different producers, and I was quite outspoken about how I wanted things. And there were a lot of producers that after a little while, I'm like, yeah, they want to do it their way, and I don't. But we did, we were the first outside band ever to record at Rolling Rock.
Wow.
With Ronnie Weiser. We did a rockabilly song, you know, stand-up bass, the whole thing, with Ray Campy. We were in this studio with the Kessel Brothers.
Oh God, the Kessel Brothers.
Yeah.
One of
They
them
tried to
just passed
sign
away.
us.
One of them just passed away,
Yeah,
right?
Dan.
Yeah.
They tried to sign us too, but they wanted all of our publishing, and we're like, no.
Did you
But-
say Ronnie Weiser?
Sorry, Nick. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt.
You said Ronnie Weiser?
Yes.
God, we were my band, the Virgins, it was called. In 1975, he recorded our first demo. It was like a garage sort of
Virgins.
studio. Yeah, he was
I'll look for it on eBay.
guy. He was an interesting guy too. No, we didn't release anything, unfortunately, but who knows? You know, we'll dig up all the old tapes. And...
Nikki, it was so great that you were so strong-willed. I mean, that you really like stood up for yourself.
Well, both of you, really, yeah.
Yeah. We ended up I produced a lot of our stuff. We did demos with some really great producers. And I don't know if Nikki, if you did with any of the same people, but one of the things that I loved about Debbie producing us was that she didn't, as you were just saying, we sounded like ourselves. She didn't change anything about it. She listened to our input. It was, you know, probably Mick Jones was the one that made us not sound like ourselves the most from The Clash. Another really good producer we had for demos was Craig Leon, who did, you know, Suicide and Blondie and the Ramones, I guess. And then this other guy that produced Rachel Sweet, I'm trying to remember his name, but Chris Betting mixed some of our stuff. But the stuff that most people like is the Debbie stuff and the stuff we did without a producer.
Wow. How about you, Nikki?
After Greg put us in the studio with a million different producers, he finally said, I don't know if Greg said it or we said it, but we're like, we're going back to Detroit. We're doing this ourselves. And that's what we did, because nobody really understood, you know, the inner band thing. I wanted to be a punk band. The guitar player wanted us to be a pop band, and we clashed constantly. So that's, you know, it's kind of a combination of both of them. And we were, you know, he kept trying to get us poppier, but then when we played live, he couldn't do anything about my show. And we were way more punk on stage than we were live. But, you know, when we were working with the Kessel Brothers, they, without our knowledge, brought in the Honeys to sing backups to make us sound better.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, this sounds great, but they're like way better than us. And, you know, this isn't really what we're looking for. And there's a lot of recordings out there that I wish I could track down, because I'd really like to hear some of them. We did some really strange pairings. Like when we were working with Ronnie Weiser, we did a semi-rockabilly version of Popsicles, Icicles.
Wow.
We did a semi-rockabilly version of Yummy, Yummy, Yummy.
Well, Nikki, you ended up working with the Gore girls, right?
I did some backups with the Gorgo Girls, but I formed a band with Amy.
Yes, that's right.
When the Gorgo Girls weren't doing anything and I wasn't doing anything, and I had moved back to Detroit in 2005, and I had met Amy like a year or two earlier in LA. And so we started hanging out, and one day I said, I've always wanted to be in a punk cover band. And she's like, me too. I'm like, let's do that. Let's just cover punk songs. And so we decided to do that. And then one day I said, oh, I wrote a song. And so I gave it to her, and then she wrote some songs, and then we started recording, and then things just kept happening. I had the Donnas were going on tour, and I texted the guitar player. I said, hey, why don't you put us on a show? And so then the manager called the next day and said, we want you to do all the shows. And I had to tell the band, I'm like, so I did something. I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this, because I didn't think it through, right? Like I never do. I didn't ask anybody. I'm like, so
right.
We could go on tour with the Donnas. And they're like, yes. I'm like, oh, good. And from that, at our first show with the Donnas, I went over and introduced myself to the DJ, because we were Facebook friends. It's Miss Guy from the Toilet Boys.
Love.
We're Facebook friends. You're a great DJ. And we just started talking. And he said, oh, I called Debbie Harry while you were playing and said she should take you on tour. And I was like, oh, cool, because people just say stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think anything would come of it. And by the time we got back to Detroit, Blondie's management had called and said, we want you to open at the Fillmore. And there's Fillmore in Detroit. So we thought it was there. And they're like, no. And it was just one show. And so me and Amy talked about it. And we're like, we're going to lose a lot of money, but how can we not do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we said yes, and then every day they called us and kept adding us on to more shows. And then So we did a bunch of West Coast shows, we did some Midwest shows, some East Coast shows, and it was an amazing experience. And we did about a third of the tour, and the nights we didn't play, it was either the B-52s or Cheap Trick, and every night we'd look at each other and like, how are we even here?
What year was that?
What year? I think it was 2010. And then we went to Japan, and all of a sudden we're like, we're not doing too bad for a punk cover band.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So like with the whole Japan thing, I mean, Nikki and I, like in the way that we talk about, we could not talk for 3 years and then just call each other up and talk. I mean, Nikki really helped me with when the B-girls, when we reformed and we decided that we wanted to go to Japan, and we actually had 2 Japanese bands open for us at one of our gigs here in Brooklyn. And Nikki said, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to know. Like Nikki and I are similar in the sense that we're just doers, it's like, just make it happen and connect with people and not think about the losing of money, because that's what it takes.
You're going to lose money on stuff. It's just how it is, especially in the music business. What do you both think of the music business now? It's almost as though it's impossible to hear rock and roll in the mainstream. It's just...
I personally don't really think about the music business now.
I was going to say, I don't know
I don't blame
about
you.
it, actually. Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
It seems
for us,
difficult.
Yeah. It was never really the business. So now it's so different because of, online stuff and digital and all of that, I don't know. There's still something so much cooler about connecting with people live that we're not doing right now because of the pandemic, but
right.
And just selling vinyl at the gigs and talking to people, it's a different thing, the whole online access and distribution, and you never actually meet your fans. I mean, part of the whole thing was playing in a small crowded club with like 100 people there,
It's just even something like MTV, because I grew up in the 90s mostly. And so MTV was a huge part, and I know it was a huge part in the 80s for culture. And now MTV doesn't even play music videos. So it's unbelievable how different music has come just in.
What is it? What is it? Do you mean like MTV or something?
Yeah,
or what is
MTV. It's still called MTV.
Yeah.
But they just play TV shows.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like our whole scene really ended in probably 1981, 1982 at the latest, and changed, then things kind of went downhill.
Kind of went to new wave.
What do you feel about Instagram? I saw a very interesting post that Peter Asher's daughter put up, and I was like, she's about Instagram making you sometimes feel like you're always comparing yourself to others, and that it's really changed. It's just not like, just having fun looking at some posts, scrolling a little bit. Now it's just always, social media presence and all this algorithm stuff. And it just has a way of making you feel, I don't know, just like crap, I guess.
I have a lot of friends that post stuff and they're like, well, I can't post this right now because of the algorithms. And,
what?
If it's 4 a.m. and I'm up, I'm like, oh, I should just post a picture. And I definitely go by a different drummer than everybody else. And I don't worry about it. Although I am really happy to be a part of the indie scene now, especially like all these bands that cite me as an influence. I am now friends with them all because, I don't know why. I didn't listen to a lot of music in the 90s.
Neither did I. Oh, yeah.
A lot of the 90s bands, are like, we cover your songs, we do this, we do that. And so I'm friends with them, and it's given me a whole new perspective on what's going on in the world. And I really do like playing overseas a lot better.
Me too.
Overseas, they appreciate rock and roll. They're way more into it. They don't worry as much about social media and kind of thing. Everybody wants to buy records. Everybody wants to buy your merch. Everybody's happy to be there. And I like that.
Yeah. Maybe it's like the 60s when jazz bands used to go to Europe, because that's where they were appreciated,
Yeah, sort of like that. But I would agree with Nikki. I don't think about that kind of stuff with Instagram, like when to post or all that. I'm still myself and I just do whatever feels right. I like Instagram much better than Facebook. I don't really love either, to tell you the truth, because I think it does make you lose your sense of reality and connection to the people that you're actually really friends with and really involved with in your real life. Yeah. It maintains some connections, but it also creates these illusions based on ego.
Yeah.
And I went off for about 3 months in August, and then I went back on because I felt I had to promote this gig that we did at Bowery Electric recently in one of the other bands that I'm in now, New York Junk. And now I'm going to go off it again. I feel like I'm happier without it. Yeah. And it's a big time thing as well. Like it takes a lot of time away from things that I could be doing that are more creative, like playing, writing music, writing, poetry, writing for my book. So I don't know.
What are some of your 60s influences? What are some of your favorite 60s bands?
Well, definitely the Rolling Stones for me. All the girl groups, the Shangri-Las, the Ronettes, the Cookies, every girl band, all the bands that the New York Dolls listened to, all the blues stuff, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, early 60s bands, some of the mod stuff. I liked the Who for a while, and then I kind of went off of them with like the whole Tommy thing, and rock opera was a bit too much for me. I loved the early Bowie stuff, Velvet Underground. with Nico and Lou Reed in general, you know.
Yeah.
I like dark, the Animals, Eric Burdon and the Animals. I like anything that's minor keys. That's my thing. I tend to be on the sad side of things rather than the happy things. I don't like treble. I'm a bass player. I don't like people who sing with really high voices. You know, it's funny how that.
Really high voices. Chipmunk.
Yeah.
But wait, you're in Canada. You have to like get Geddy Lee, right?
Wait, are you in Canada?
No, I'm in New York. In New York.
From Canada.
My
right?
sister,
Yeah.
my sister actually worked for their management company. I went to high school with those guys. So
Oh
no.
my God, I love
Gary-
Rush.
Gary Weinrib. No, not one of my favorites. Those are the bands that guys liked, you know.
Yeah, well, they know
Did you
that.
like any of the Laurel Canyon scene?
Like who?
Beach
Joni
Boys.
Mitchell, Beach Boys.
Well, she's
I don't
Canadian
know.
Yeah,
too,
Beach
Joni
Boys.
Mitchell, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Beach
find
Boys.
that having had a lot of free time during the pandemic, I've been watching every rock documentary I can find, and there are a lot of them. And once I got through the ones I really wanted to see, I would just start watching random stuff like ZZ Top and Rush and Bad Brains. You know, bands that, some were bands that I didn't like, some were bands that I knew nothing about. And one of the interesting things is how many of the 60s and 70s bands I saw and liked at the time. You know, I'm kind of all over the place musically. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I like the Laurel Canyon folky stuff. You know, I like heavy metal. I like punk. I like pop. I like girl groups. I like rockabilly. I can't put it down to one thing.
Right.
I like everything. And I'm amazed. I think when I was a teenager that my musical taste was way better than it is now. Because when I look back on like the bands I saw and liked, I was like, wow, I knew a lot when I was, you know.
Right.
16,
Now,
17.
Nikki, I saw a picture of you and it made me so jealous with Ray Davies. What's the story
your man.
behind that? Because I don't want to, but what's the story about that?
I don't remember. I don't know. I think that picture might be in New York, but I'm not totally sure. I met all the Kinks and hung out with them in Detroit. Dave Davies actually invited me to go to Chicago with them, and I was like, yeah, no. My brain is full. There's so much stuff I don't remember because I have tried the Ray Davies picture. I have tried to remember where it was, why I took it, what I was doing, and I honestly have no idea.
I thought for sure I was going to marry Ray Davies, like 100% positive, sure.
You were wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. I guess I can't say that I like everything. I definitely don't like heavy metal. And I don't I mean, I don't know. I think about the bands that I really liked when I was young, like the early David Bowie, the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck, the Small Faces, the Faces, you know.
Best live band ever.
Yeah, big Anglophiles. Detroit and Toronto were big on all and Alice Cooper. Yeah, all of that. I mean, they were huge influences. Susie Quatro, love Susie Quatro. Yeah.
Love her.
Yeah.
The glam
All
stuff.
the glam stuff, Mark Bolan, T-Rex. Yeah.
I can remember seeing the first Dolls record in the in the window of Licorice Pizza and going, what? You know, I was so amazed and so blown away.
Did either of you get to see the Plasmatics, or did you get
I saw the Plasmatics. Yeah, I saw them at CBG a bunch of times.
Were you blown away? Were you like, oh my God, what is this crazy lady doing?
Yeah, I was in a fence, so that's like one that I could say I really didn't like it because it was probably too much over the edge for me at the time. But now I can probably appreciate it, like what Nick, you know, like I guess I'm more open now. I mean, I like a lot of the noise bands now that I didn't really like at the time. I mean, I love Lydia Lunch now, and I wasn't really a fan of all of those things at the time. They were too much on the arty side for me. It was
Yeah.
like I wasn't a big television fan.
Right.
I love Patti Smith because just her strong image and her poetry and all of that. But
what about the Talking Heads?
No.
Yeah. So
I love her honesty. I know.
But you know what? I like them now. That's what I mean. Like now, I mean, Tina is a great bass player, and they were really creative. But they were definitely not something that I would have put on my record player. No.
Did you like any of the LA punk bands?
Yes. Yeah. So I loved. We were really good friends with people who were our label mates, like the Zeros. And,
they were great.
Yeah, and then there were the who were those two brothers that were like really cute? The Dills. Yes.
I love them so much.
Yes.
Chip and Tony.
Yeah, they were great. And
X.
I'm trying to think of who else? Yeah, X. And connected with them. I didn't know Alice back then.
No.
We weren't part of that same scene. They were more political, I would say.
Did you ever go to the Mask? Did you
Yeah, we did. I went with Stiv to a bunch of different places in San Francisco and LA. We spent a lot of time out there. We spent like a month and a bit out there at one time.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember when Blondie came to LA for like a month, and we stayed at the what was it called? The Bel Air Sands Hotel for free.
Wow.
And I just hung out there, and we went thrift shopping remember the things that you could buy thrift shopping back then were incredible. We used to go to Pasadena.
Right. We got arrested in LA for walking. So when I think about writing that chapter for my book, it's going to be called Walking While Blonde, because we were staying at the Tropicana, and we had a gig at the Whiskey, and we were in Stiv's bungalow at the Tropicana. And that is during the time that Blondie was out there for a month, and we sang backups on her record, Auto American. And we were, in New York, everybody walks. In Toronto, everybody walks. So we took our guitars, and we were walking from the Tropicana to the Whiskey. And it was the middle of the afternoon for sound check. It was about 4:00, and these cops stopped and pulled us over and asked us for ID, and we didn't have ID on us. And so they took us to the police station, and they wouldn't let us go. They were going to arrest us for not carrying ID. And they said, "What are you doing walking? Nobody walks. What are you doing? Like, what are you girls doing?" And they didn't believe that we were actually of age. I think I was 21 and the other girls were 19. They thought we were underage, and I don't know what they thought we were doing, but we had to call Stiv. He wasn't at the hotel, and we had to wait because there were no cell phones till he got back there to go and bring our passports to the police station so that we could go and do our sound check. And they told us, "Don't walk. Next time, don't walk."
It's like that song, "Nobody Walks in LA" by the Missing Persons.
It's true.
I guess it is true.
Did Tom Waits have a room there at the Tropicana?
He was next door to us. He was our next door neighbor across the way. And B-girls, all of us were sleeping in one bed. You've seen the pictures that Teresa Kariakis took of us with Stiv, those great pictures in the bungalow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Do you remember the Blondie party at the Bel Air Sands?
I don't know. No, not really. Maybe we weren't there for that.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy.
Before we go, I want to ask each of you, what is your best Spinal Tap moment?
Well, my Spinal Tap moment was that show that I did with me and Stiv and Sid and Nancy. To me, that's the punk Spinal Tap. It's hilarious. It's ridiculous. It's hilarious. I always say that's what that
Tap.
Yeah, that New York cable show.
I guess mine would be, I don't really think it's a Spinal Tap moment, but we were on tour and we were doing a show in, I think, Chicago, and I was really sick. I had the flu, and I told the band that I couldn't go on because I was too sick. And the guitar player said, if you don't do this show, we're not, we're just going home, and, we're not going to play together anymore or whatever. So I did the show. I was like, I'm pale anyway, but I was like a ghost. And at one point I walked over and puked behind the guitar player's amp. The guitar player that made me play. So I puked behind his amp.
Oh, yeah.
And then went on and finished the show. Yeah. And, the crowd loved it. They thought it was the most punk thing ever.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of really embarrassed and humiliated, but we did the show.
Can we all go to Japan together?
Yes, I have one last question for Nikki.
Okay.
Yes.
When are we going to do our thing together? We've been talking about it for years. Nikki and I
When
want
the
to.
pandemic's over, we are.
Yes, we have to. It's like unfinished business.
Yep.
Are you guys doing a band?
We're going to do something. We want to go to Japan together, do something together.
That's
Yeah.
so great.
You heard it here first on
You
Metal Priestesses.
first.
Wow.
You both look amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's music. It's rock and roll.
I tell people that all the time. I tell people, because they're like, you don't have any wrinkles. I'm like, rock and roll keeps me young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I do have wrinkles, but I don't care.
I don't think you do.
All the people I play with now are all like 20, 30 years younger than me. So that helps too.
Nikki, is there anything that you're binge watching right now that you could recommend?
I don't know how I feel about the show, but Firefly Lane, because in the first episode, halfway through,
your song.
My song. There's a Corvette song, and there's nothing else going on. It's like a video montage with my song playing, and I didn't even know about it. I mean, I knew I was going to have a song in the series, but I didn't know it started. I didn't know it was in the first episode. I didn't know it was so dominant until I was watching TV and I started getting all these texts and messages, people going, I just saw you on Firefly Lane. So I watched it and I was like, wow. And other than that, I like watching a lot of really bad teen dramas with a supernatural.
I'm not watching anything good.
I had to stop watching Riverdale. It got too
because
weird.
it sucks now.
It's always been weird, but now it got really weird. Like last season, I was like, okay,
the first season was really good.
Yeah.
How about you, Cynthia? Are you binge watching anything?
No, but I did because there's nothing good that I haven't watched is how I feel. But I really like that crazy Hand of God. Did anybody watch that?
No.
Yeah, it's like a dark comedy, very deep. I like weird stuff. I fall asleep with the romance kind of stuff, and I don't know. I guess I'm like that in life too, which is why I'm alone.
No. I want to
That's
thank
smart.
Yeah, I want to thank you both for being on the show because
Wait, Cynthia has to do
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Cynthia,
Yes,
you've got to do a commercial for us because Nikki already did one. So
say everybody tune in and watch the Metal Priestess podcast.
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cynthia Ross of the B-Girls, and I'm inviting everybody to tune in and watch the Metal Priestess podcast. It's a tongue twister.
One more time.
Cynthia Ross of the B-Girls, and I'm inviting everyone to tune in to the Metal Priestess podcast.
Yay. Good job.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to meet both of
I
you.
know, really.
And I really hope
great.
we could see each other in person.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
I hope you
Cynthia and I
guys.
are rock and roll sisters forever.
Yes.
From the 70s,
love you.
From the 70s, still going strong.
Oh wow.
Yes, definitely.
I love it.
You know what? We're still causing trouble.
I love it.
Definitely.
Probably me more than you.
I'm having more fun now than I did in the 70s, I'll say.
Never stop. Never stop.
Oh, I won't.
Not a chance. Yeah.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much for having us.